Okay, so welcome again to everyone that has joined us now. I would like to introduce all of our participants today. Again, my name is Jen Lemberger, and I'm a programming librarian at the Santa Barbara Public Library. And with us today, we have Fran Wagnick, who is the Assistant Superintendent at the Santa Barbara Unified School District. Gina Carvalho, who is the Executive Director at the Santa Barbara Response Network, and Suzanne Grimacy, who is the Chief Quality Care and Strategy Officer at the Santa Barbara County Department of Behavioral Wellness. So we pulled this panel together as part of a number of programs. One is it's part of Book to Action, which is a program that the library has been doing for the last 2 years, where we pick a book that we would like the community to read, but then particularly have follow-up actions that the community can partake in. So this is one of those programs as we focused on mental health and suicide this year. The book we chose is Where Reasons End by Yi Yoon Lee, and we do have free copies of that book that can be requested. So feel free to email the library if you would like a copy of those. And as well, May is National Mental Health Awareness Month. So we wanted to do the programming during this time and bring light to a topic that we do not often talk about and we need to be talking about more, and be able to just normalize mental health as a part of regular health and wellness. And with that, I will just let the panel take over. We're going to have each of them tell us about themselves as well as the organization that they work for, services that are being offered, and particularly that are related to COVID-19. And then we'll move from that into a moderated Q&A, as well as then opening it up to any of the attendees for Q&A. So while the presentations are going on, I do ask that everyone put themselves on mute. And anything that you have questions about during at any point, feel free to put that in the comments on Facebook, as well as in the chat in Zoom, as I will be monitoring those. And with that, I will have Fran take it away.
All right, thank you, Jen, for bringing us here tonight and giving us the opportunity to talk about this just really important topic. And yes, starting out about me, I won't do my whole biography. I'll spare you all that. But you know, I was raised in this community. Came to Santa Barbara in 1972 as a first grader, and raised, you know, middle class upbringing. Attended Vieja Valley, La Colina, and San Marcos, and went off to college, and you know, did well, and really, by all outward appearances, everything was very well. But I'm the child of an alcoholic. I'm also 20 years sober myself, and have experienced anxiety and depression as long as I can kind of remember. Age 4 or 5, a lot of anxiety as a child, even though outwardly it was hard to see that. And you know, I always try to dip into my own past and remember what it was like for me. That there were times in high school, especially, where it was very difficult. But because I was a high achiever and I was very involved in school, and I did a good job of covering it up, and I didn't know how to ask for help. And if I had, I'm not sure that in 1982 or 1983, I'm not sure what kind of help I would have gotten. So I try to remember that and the loneliness that I had. And that really drives me to just bust the stigma, really, is what it comes down to. So in my career, I was a school counselor for quite a while, and I was worked as an assistant principal, and I was a principal in alternative ed. And I've worked with a variety of students, regardless of their demographics, their background, their family situation. Mental health is something that it's important that we pay attention to, because a student who is not doing well is not going to achieve academically. And so that I think that's why that's an area that I especially am drawn to focusing on with our youth, is so that they can access their academics and do well in life in general. So for the last 5 years, I've been the assistant superintendent of student services at Santa Barbara Unified. And 3 years ago, we experienced an uptick in suicide attempts, and we had a large number. And both Gina and Suzanne, really, the three of us worked together a lot during that time, and were able to work with Dr. Robert Macy from the International Trauma Center and his team. And so what have we done as a district? We've put in place the Signs of Suicide curriculum that helps students understand how they can notice the signs of depression in themselves and others, what to do when they see those signs, and that really includes telling a trusted adult. And so in order for students to be able to tell a trusted adult, we needed to make sure that our adults were ready to receive that. So that's been a big part of the work that we've been doing. And when I say we, I'm talking about the school district, but I'm also very much have to include our community partners in that: County Behavioral Wellness, Santa Barbara Response Network, Family Service Agency, CALM, the members of the Youth Well Coalition, who are our partners as well. All of us working together as a community to address that crisis. And I can thankfully say that the number of attempts has decreased by nearly 70% since that time. However, COVID has brought us back into a place where we're really watching students very closely. So during this time, our school counselors, our deans of student engagement, our teachers, and then our in-school service providers from Family Service Agency and CALM have really been on the front lines, tracking students down who are missing, who aren't attending school virtually, and literally tracking them down, literally going to houses and knocking on their doors despite our warnings to be safe during COVID. So we have seen the number of attempts increase during this time, but in addition to tracking students down and checking in, Family Service Agency and CALM have both continued to not just see their students, but to provide services, and then also increase the work that they're doing by offering different groups and programs virtually for families and for students. Finally, our team, in conjunction with our community partners, put together a couple of videos several weeks ago that were sent out to students and to parents separately on just reminders of what to look out for, how to take care of themselves, their friends, and their children. And we will continue to do that until well, forever, but really during the COVID crisis, we'll continue to do that. And we're actually in 7th through 12th grade in secondary schools. Normally we take a break with therapeutic in-school services, but this year Family Service Agency is going to continue seeing all of their clients throughout the summer, including our seniors, who technically won't be our students after next Wednesday, but Family Service Agency is going to continue to see them into August until they're able to transition to a new therapist. So that's the basics of what we have going on right now.
Great. Thank you, Fran. Gina, introduce yourself and the Response Network and let us know what's going on with you and other community orgs.
Yeah, thank you. Fran, thank you for sharing what's going on with you. Not just, it reminded me personally of why I am so involved in this work, because I'm an immigrant, and I came from Portugal to Canada without speaking the language, with having parents who were practically illiterate, not being able to access services, not knowing how to read and write. So my heart is very much it resonates with so many members of our community who have a lack of access to resources. You know, I was the 6-year-old that sat in the waiting room and translated. So while COVID was hitting, or any other mental health issues going on in our community, I'm always kind of looking out for those pockets in our community that may not be able to know how to navigate the system. They might not know where to call, and that there is help. When I was in school, they'd say, Gina, there's help. And I go, no, you know, families are closed, especially Latino families of Portuguese, very similar. We don't talk about mental health. We don't open up our home. And there was abuse and alcohol in my home, and we didn't talk about it. And so from that place, as Fran described her own background, that's informed so much of the work that I've been doing here in Santa Barbara with the Santa Barbara Response Network. And really, the work could not happen without Suzanne and Fran, because these partnerships that we have formed over so many years, in forming the community wellness team, which we're all part of, a conglomerate of agencies who have this similar attitude, which is, where do you need help, and where are we hurting, and what can we do? So we meet regularly on phone calls, on Zoom calls, on whatever we can do to see where those needs are. The Santa Barbara Response Network was formed 11 years ago, where there was an increase in suicides in the Latino community. And we did a lot of psychological first aid. Dr. Macy came, trained the community. And we thought, wow, this is really working. Why don't we keep this little agency going, SBRN? And I love the model because it's grassroots. We really are a mobile response team, English and Spanish, 24/7. People can call and basically tell us what they're needing in terms of mental health. And because of our partners, like on this call today, I'm a conduit. I find and can collect, sort of a handoff to where the person might need to get more help. So SBRN is a touch point. People trust us. We've been in so many incidents in the community, from suicides to, Isla Vista, to shootings, to whatever. The families, they recognize our volunteers, and so they might call us, and then I will reach out and carry them forward to the services we have here. So SBRN offers psychological first aid. We do trainings regularly now online, but also face-to-face, and we did training at the library with Jen and her staff on just basically the psychological first aid model. Is, how do you be present with someone who's undergoing or is experiencing trauma? And all our volunteers are trained. They're all volunteers. They're all like coming because they want to be of service. Nobody's paid. They just want to help. They're good neighbors. And that is not therapy, but it's powerful because it's, hey, friend to neighbor, how can I help you? So recently during COVID, a lot of the calls we've been getting are really people saying, I have no food. I think the people I'm living with have COVID. I don't know what to do. I don't speak English. I'm not documented. I'm afraid. So what I'm seeing in the community is tremendous fear, anxiety, uncertainty. And we're able to help them navigate what is available. And there is help. There's definitely help. But that stigma and that fear has held people back. So we've been pretty busy with not just face-to-face. I mean, as much as we can, we've delivered food and things like that. But we're also doing a lot of things on Facebook Live in English and Spanish every day. We're sharing resources with the community. Our team has specialties in various aspects of mental health, like with the school district, with Ali Cortez, who's doing so much work with youth in the community. So we're kind of tapped in nicely to the community, and we can just offer services and get people to the help that they need. So we've been pretty busy and trying to really gear that response model online. And that's always challenging, but it's working. And I think the messages that Suzanne and Fran and I have been working on is like, you're not alone. There is help. Please reach out. And that's really what I want to leave people with. And that I wish when I was a child that I had really heard that. And we really do have incredible resources in Santa Barbara.
Agreed. Thanks, Gina. And then lastly, Suzanne, share with us who you are and all things county behavioral wellness.
Okay, thank you for the invitation to join. I'm proud to say that I also moved to Santa Barbara in the first grade, went to Vieja Valley, La Colina, and San Marcos. So I'm a proud Santa Barbarian, and I graduated from the same high school, and I love our community, and for so many reasons, and being able to raise my children in the same community, but for just what we're seeing in this dialogue is how we work together as a community. So I went away to undergraduate school in San Diego, and then I came back here and commuted, did my graduate work, but have remained in Santa Barbara. I've worked with the county for, 23 years now. I've been with behavioral wellness, and the department has a lot of services. So I'll share some of the services that are offered there, but then talk about some other work that kind of goes outside the lines of the department alone. So behavioral wellness, the services that they offer year-round are still open, active, and available right now as well. So when we talk about what's available with COVID. So we have everything from our outpatient clinics for children and for adults. We have community-based organizational providers, so a number of community-based services that take place for kids and adults. We have intensive in-home for adults and kids. We have a wraparound program for kids, the same type of model, assertive community treatment for adults. We have a whole robust crisis system from mobile crisis workers, mobile crisis triage team, community residential treatment, up to inpatient hospitalization. So we offer the whole continuum, and our services, I think like everyone else's, haven't stopped. Some have been modified and that we've offered more telehealth, but all are available. We have a sobering center as well that briefly stopped, but is back up in action. So that's the department. And we also have a 24/7 access line, which has been invaluable. And we started to see it drop off at the very, very start of COVID hitting in our community. And since then, it's spiked way up. And it's a nice barometer as well for our department to get a feel of the types of calls coming in. Behavioral wellness also leads the community wellness team, which Gina mentioned. That was a team, another example of our community, that after the Thomas fire and the debris flow, there were calls pouring in from agencies and individuals wanting to help. And that's a great thing, but unless that's organized, it can be confusing for the community. So together, we've got over 13 organizations that came together to provide a whole continuum of crisis services, individual, family, critical incident debriefings, all the way to an intensive outpatient program at Cottage. And that team has amazingly and strongly stayed in place since that time, and has been involved in multiple traumatic events that have happened within our community, and has tailored all of the services now for COVID-19. So everything is available by telehealth virtually. The nice thing about that is it makes it no longer a South County-based program, but we're able to offer the services to North County.
Mhm.
So the community wellness team has a website, a phone number, happy to share those, but it serves as a resource to connect people to services, connect people to help. We also have engaged now with COVID a whole troop of hospice volunteers. They're part of our community wellness team anyway, but doing a lot of outreach to older adults and just making the regular connections and calls. So that's a bit of what we do. The other thing I wanted to mention that I think comes into play year round and with this as well, we've been involved as a department, I have been, and the community wellness team with a lot of traumatic events. And I believe so strongly that people walk away from events like that being impacted, not necessarily because of the magnitude or the kind of the event, but it's their experience with it. And that's why my belief, and I know others, on critical incident debriefings, on trauma response and support are so critical at that vulnerable time. And we have that right now as a community. We have this invisible thing that's very scary, that leaves a lot of fear, as Gina mentioned, a lot of unknowns. We're seeing, yes, we are seeing an increase in suicide attempts for adults and children. And I think it's largely founded on not our consumers that are open for mental health treatment, but people that don't have a history like that. And now they're experiencing loss of their business, loss of a job, impact in their family. And that doesn't normally ring our brain to think mental health. It rings our brain to think that I have no other option. So all that to say, we work as a community. I'm proud to be a part of that, and I appreciate being here tonight.
Great, thank you. And that actually leads nicely into sort of the first question I have. And, you know, several people have mentioned, you know, the stigma and, you know, anxiety around reaching out or not being sure how to reach out. But I'd also like to ask from each of you, what does mental health mean to you? And then within that, is this the absence of mental illness? Feel free, whomever would like to start.
Well, I think it's important, for me, it's important to draw the distinction between mental illness and mental health or mental wellness. Because both professionally and professionally, as educators, we don't want to put a pathology on a student. So when we're talking about students' mental wellness or mental health, you know, every person experiences levels of anxiety and depression, happiness, joy, all these states. And so for me, mental wellness is really about being able to function at your optimum level when you're mentally well. And if there's a struggle with mental wellness, you're not going to reach that optimal state. And it's all on a spectrum and a continuation. And so versus a mental illness, which is diagnosed and treated and hopefully, you know, never usually cured, but you're able to function in the world. So for me, that's how I draw that distinction. And we definitely within schools, we don't put pathology on students. We have students who have mental illness, especially because adolescence is the time when a lot of mental illness starts to show itself. And so those students who have those needs, we are aware of those, but that's not really what we're talking about in terms of when we're addressing mental health or mental wellness in school.
Yeah, I'll speak next, but really echoing what Fran said. So I agree, mental health, being mentally well, that's what all of us, that's when you feel good. That's when you feel good within yourself. When you wake up feeling happy, that's when you feel good about engaging in activities, work, with friendships, socially. For kids, mental health is when you can sit in the classroom and listen well and pay attention and be involved in sports and you feel good. But all of us as human beings have days where we're feeling like that and then days where we're not feeling like that. And that's, I think, a part of our destigmatizing that getting help when we need it is okay. If anything, it makes us stronger and more able to help others. But that's the okay part about it. And as Fran mentioned, there's a serious mental illness. Our mental illness can range from being biologically based, in which case medications are oftentimes helpful in conjunction with other supports, but it can also be as a result of a traumatic event. So it's all over the place, and so many mental illnesses can be co-occurring and coexisting, but even within a diagnosable mental illness, people can have mental wellness. They can have mental health, they can feel good, and they can function, and that's always, always the goal. So again, just to take away that stigma, we all go through not feeling mentally healthy. And that's the time where we reach out for help. And it may be supports we have naturally, and it may be reaching out for professional supports, but we all deserve to have that.
You know, it's such a good question. I mean, again, with Fran and Suzanne said, I completely echo with both of them. And then I was thinking about mental health or mental well-being. And I was in a course recently where somebody said, have you ever had a course on mental health when you were in school? And these were practitioners, and we said, no. I said, that's really interesting, because when we go to school as therapists, we learn about mental illness, but what is mental health and what is mental wellness? And that's a very good question, because the way I see it is we're a mind, body, spirit. We're an integration of all of that energy within our body, within our, our thinking, our emotions, and that gets out of whack when there's trauma or a chemical imbalance or whatever, substance, we get out of whack. And so we don't feel well. We're not healthy. We're not feeling in balance, or in a sense, we're not in a sense in well-being. So since COVID hit, what I've been focusing a lot on is self-care, because so many people are in a state of anxiety and fear and not having practices or knowing things that they can do to get them maybe into more of a state of balance. And that's getting your body healthy, learning how to relax. And as Fran said, with anxiety, dealing with anxiety, or if you're needing your medication, whatever it is that's going to help you to regulate and get through this and have a sense of well-being and a sense of self. So we're always striving for that optimum. And I do every day. And if it wasn't for the practices and things I have in place every day, I would be depressed. I miss so much in my life, so many people, so many relationships, so many activities. I'm grieving. I'm also in a state of grief. I'm grieving the things that I love. So how can I navigate that? And that's been kind of my challenge, and the things I've been trying to educate people on. How do you find that? And it's the same as after a trauma, any trauma. How do you create that sense of resilience again that's in us?
Thanks. I have a quote. I found this recently. It's from Elizabeth Guzman, and she's a program coordinator at the Children's Health Fund, which is an organization out of New York. And I really appreciated how she stated this. So she says, I wish people knew that mental health is far more than a label or a diagnosis. Mental health is about self-awareness, coping through the stresses of life, and having support systems in place to help us do that. It's caring for our mental and emotional well-being. Oftentimes, we associate mental health with illness, and they are not the same. Think of it this way. You touched on this, Gina. We care for our physical bodies by exercising, healthy eating habits, doing checkups. And we need to do all of those things for our well-being and our mental health as well. We ought to take that same approach. It's just as important. And I think that's something we're missing in these, where we've talked
Mhm.
about the destigmatization
Mhm. Mhm.
of seeking help, even if we do not have a diagnosable mental illness. Particularly if we do, everyone across the spectrum needs help
Mhm.
and support in various ways. Gina, you mentioned, grief, and I think one of the
Mhm.
things, what might people be seeing in themselves right now and those around them during this time that are
Mhm.
making them feel different, but they might not be able to name or pinpoint. And so I think grief is one of those, but what else
Yeah,
are we seeing and that we need
huge.
to name for others?
What I'm seeing is sleep disturbances. I think everybody I've talked to is having challenges with their sleep. I just waking up early, not sleeping, whatever. So sleep disturbances, probably more drinking, more drugs, more ways to kind of dull ourselves from that fear. Tremendous amount of anxiety. And I think existential grief. I think for me, what's been stirred up, and of course, my husband is much older, so I'm always saying this, when you're with someone who is toward the end of their life and all of a sudden this has come up, I think about, am I going to die? And is he going to die in COVID? I mean, with this isolation. So I think about these things, and I see grief in terms of some of the challenge, the trips we were going to take, the things we had put in place. I'm grieving seeing my grandchildren. I'm grieving a sense of just spontaneity and freedom. My freedom was so important to me. So I see people just frustrated. When I wake up in the morning, I'm in a kind of, I don't know how to describe it, kind of a limbo until I get up and start exercising. I'm kind of foggy and disoriented. And I remember that as a child, like, where am I? And so I think people are experiencing disorientation, grief, longing, fear, and feeling alone. So any collective experience like this is so healing and reaching out.
And I would add to that, Gina, too, everything you said, but also a really profound sense of not having control over your life, over your job,
Yeah.
over your, I mean, so many things. And I think a big part of that, which is, well, maybe we talk about it, we've lost our schedules. So we have to create new schedules, and that doesn't
Yeah.
come inherently for a lot of people, especially kids. So that feeling of that the schedule kids do have. So when you get up and you go to school and you see your teachers and you're in the classroom, and you may gripe about how early it is or how much homework, but it's predictable and you know what to expect.
Yeah.
And none of that is there right now. So to be able to recreate schedules that are kind of faux schedules, but their schedules are so important, and at least give us a way to have some sense of control over our lives and putting things together. But it doesn't come inherently, so it's an invisible thing. And I think too, we're such creatures of what we see other people do. I mean, take for example the toilet paper and the hand sanitizer disappearing from the shelves. I think for a lot of people, they just better do this, it's going to be gone. And here we are seeing people start to re-enter the community as we reopen. We see people without masks, with masks, with a few people walking alone, and it's a scary time. Like, what's okay, what's not okay? I want to do this right. So yes, a lot of anxiety, a lot of loss of control. Yeah.
So you guys have talked about some of these things in your comments, but if, making a schedule for, some of our loss of control, eating well, what are suggestions that we might have for individuals for the practice of self-care during this time as well, when we talk about this, including ideas for different ages, different resource levels, different social circumstances, etc. And then also, why is it so important to be thinking of self-care right now? So what can we do? What are some suggestions, and why is that important?
I think one thing we've emphasized since the shutdown with all of us who work within the school district, but especially the teachers, um, is to take care of themselves first. So that concept of the oxygen mask when you're on the airplane, you know, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on the children. And so within the context of working with children, whether it's as a parent or as an educator, you cannot take care of the kids if you're not taking care of yourself. So self-care for me has been about exactly what Gina was talking: sleep, making sure getting the good sleep. And you know, for me, I've had this interesting experience in that I am sleeping better. I am exercising regularly. I am slowing down. I monitor my heartbeat. My heart rate has dropped every single month since the shutdown. And I reflect on that, and that's because I'm taking better care of myself, which makes me, then I started getting anxious a couple days ago as things start to open up, and think, oh my gosh, how am I going to keep this up? Because I'm actually been taking care of myself. So I want to hold on to that and take care of that. So I think we have to give ourselves permission to do it in this society, permission to take care of ourselves. And for me, the shutdown gave me permission to slow down and do what was essential. So I think it's, for me, you asked a question. I think I'm putting a wondering out there of like, how do we give ourselves permission to continue taking care of ourselves during this time?
Yeah, I think that's
wonderful.
So true. The minutes and the days and the weeks are different during this time, and it really allows us to slow down and to pause and to reflect. And I so hope, Fran, that others do exactly as you're doing and pause and figure out how we can hang on to that. So the things that Fran just said, what Gina said, sleeping well, getting outside, moving your body, exercising, eating well, taking breaks, connecting with others, both the internal connections of those within the household where you're staying together and that's strengthening, but also the reaching out and connecting with others, which I think can be strengthened with this too, because we're being intentional about it. But that connection piece is so important, and I think has really gained momentum through this, and I hope it stays.
I think this is so important, Fran. I really appreciate you both talking about this, because I was thinking about resilience today, and I was thinking about when we were dealing with all the suicides, that we were talking about messaging. And the messaging is, you're going to get through this, there's hope, and stories of people who have survived. So my SBRN is a volunteer sort of thing for me, but my job is at the Glendon Association. And today we interviewed Kevin Hines, who's been in our community several times. And this is a free interview I'm going to be sharing. And Kevin has been very active during COVID because of the increase of calls to the text line, which she's involved with, and the suicide lifeline. And I wanted to hear, and we wanted to hear, what are your messages? What are you sending people? What are you telling people? And it's always those stories of resilience and getting through it and survival. So when Fran was talking about her life now, actually she's taking better care of herself. And Suzanne is talking about this different, we're in a different life, but what about those stories? And today I read New Zealand has no cases of COVID. So that made me happy. I'm just reading that thing in the news, like, where are those stories of we need to, and that's what we've been talking about, messaging. How can we say we're going to get through this, and here's somebody who did, and here's a country that did, and even though you may have, and that emotions, I think the thing I learned from Kevin is that nothing is static. We're always moving. So you might feel depressed today and feel really bad, but that's not permanent. You have to understand that's not permanent. And a person in that state doesn't quite grasp that. They think, oh, I'm going to feel like this forever and ever, but you're not. And so that, even with COVID, this is not forever. We don't know how long, and there's existential fear, but there will be movement. We just don't know what it is right now. So, and I try to keep that in my heart, like the stories of people who have survived so many incredibly difficult times. And we are survivors.
Yeah. And I also think one of the things for mental health right now is also, another thing to give ourselves permission on is to not feel, none of these things are necessarily easy to do, but also give ourselves the permission to not be as productive as previously. Not needing to be on 8 hours. Like, we're all going through so much stress and in a collective way, but that to expect that you will be functioning at that level is also a permission to not be there, to not have to stress out about being at that level. We do have a question related to this from one of our attendees, and they're interested if we all can address what we might do or how someone might address the fear of having to go back to the way things were before, now that things are opening up, and giving ourselves permission, to maintain these things, but what are some strategies, what are some resources, because there's fear right now of the various different things, but as we do reopen, as Fran said, there's a different type of fear that is being engendered. And if there are any thoughts or suggestions on that.
That's difficult. I mean, I think for us right now in the Santa Barbara Unified School District and all school districts across the country, the question is going back to the way things were in terms of school, and when can we do that? And people want assurances, and for some folks, they're like, open up tomorrow. My kids need their normalcy back. And then there are other folks who feel the opposite and just have a fear of having to go back to the way things were because for various reasons. So there's a lot of the unknown right now. And so having to go back to the way it was, I think we have the opportunity right now to really look at what is optimal in terms of schools and workplace and personal life and so forth. And, for some of that, there's more of a luxury. I'm more privileged in where I sit right now, talking about being able to sleep and exercise and eat right and take care of myself, when some people are just trying to hang on. But I'm hopeful that most of us, wherever we're sitting, we're able to look and say, do we have to go back to how it was, or is there a better way? We have this pause button, and I don't think we have to go back to everything being exactly the same. I don't think it should, and I don't think it can. But that doesn't mean that we have to be anxious or fearful about it. It means we need to feel our feelings. We need to talk about it with other people, and know that it's going to be messy and not easy, and but nothing good ever comes from ease. I don't believe that. I think things have to be difficult in order to get better. So my perspective.
I think that's excellent. And I think we do have an opportunity. We all do. And the more of us that recognize that, the bigger the opportunity gets as a community. I don't think I know in the near future, when we talk about going back to normal, it's not going to be going back to the normal before COVID. There's going to be so many changes, not only changes for health and safety reasons, but we've learned a lot. I mean, look at the school system, the younger kids are one thing, but in the college system, people are taking their classes online. You know, I can't imagine things totally going back to the way that they were before. Classrooms, even in the secondary and elementary schools, those will be different with social distancing. Workplaces are going to be different. There's so many things that will be different. I think my point in saying that is we have a lot of control independently and in groups of how we want things to look. I think we do have a lot, and this has been a time to stop and pause. The reflections of taking better care of ourselves than ever before, the reflections of how important the connections have been with loved ones, all of those things, we have an opportunity to hang on to that. And like Fran said, it's I think we greet the discomforting feeling, the anxiety, the worry, what will it be like? We greet it, we feel it, and then we move on. And we have a lot of control once we get past that hurdle.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And also, what you're both saying is, let's take the things that have been working well for us, and we know they've been working. Let's apply those to wherever we end up, because we're not going to end up the way it was. I see this like having a baby. Once you have a baby, your life is never the same. You can never go back. It's just the way it is. So this is COVID. It's not going to go back. There is no that. It's going to be an integration of all of these things. And what is it that's working for me? That's what I have to look at, that I can, as my life goes somewhat back to a more free state, what's been working, like Fran said, her blood pressure, everything's better. So let's take that and move it forward. The planet is healing. The planet is healing. We never thought we would stop long enough to have the emission level go down. Our waters are cleaner. Our ocean, everything is a little bit cleaner. So there's a cleansing that's going on, but there's also this underlying psychological dread and fear that we're having to deal with. And why we're having this panel is because on a certain level, we're having to digest this tremendous change, and which brings up people's trauma too, that they experience this fear and loss. So we've got a lot of people in a heightened state, but at the same time, there are things that we are putting in place that have been very effective. So we need to take stock of that and kind of integrate what we can back when we do return to a more open life.
Thanks. I have one more question before we finish up with this. And, Fran, you mentioned, your own recognized privilege. Suzanne mentioned some of our older community members and seniors. Gina, you mentioned immigrants. And so thinking through, are there any mental health concerns or additional populations within our community that we should be centering and bringing to the fore so that we are all more aware? So seniors, Black, Indigenous people of color, LGBTQ plus, youth. What are we seeing, and what are some of the things that particularly those of us that are in these places of privilege should be doing and knowing within our community?
I think who comes to mind for me is it definitely is our children who live in more difficult situations. Our immigrant population, folks who are living, doubled, tripled, quadrupled up in houses, and going to school or going out was absolutely necessary to their mental well-being, because if you're renting a room in a house, a family of 5, getting out, I think about those kids every day. And I think about the kids and the family members who are living in a violent household and are stuck. Really, it's an imprisoned situation. So that's who I'm thinking of regularly. And then, of course, as you said, our seniors. I'm thinking about our LGBTQ especially the youth who are living in households where their families are having issues with who they are. So that's who's in the forefront of my mind right now.
I'll share for myself, it's some of the same, but kids and adults that are living in, as Fran said, trapped in a situation with physical abuse taking place, or kids that are witnessing domestic violence or sexual abuse. I've had 2 conversations just today alone with kids that are experiencing that at home that are trapped in it, or parents may not be aware of the signs and symptoms of things taking place between siblings in that regard. So those that while the rest of us are finding self-care and pausing and replenishing, those that are trapped, they're very much on my mind. And with that, the older adult population, as I think was already mentioned, and also people, kids and adults with pre-existing mental health needs, that this has only made it worse. So situations like anxiety and stress, this isn't a good pairing with that. It has the ability to really make things flare up more. So those are some that are on my mind.
Yeah. Oh, same exactly. I actually wake up at night thinking about these kids, and I feel like we can't do enough, you know. How can we reach out? What can we offer? What can we do? Because the children, the people in violent situations, the feeling of being trapped, some of the families we've been responding to, one young mother who had a 2-year-old, and she thought she had COVID, and she thought, who's going to take care of my baby? I have no family. I have no one here. I live in a house with, my brother is dying of COVID. I have no one. And I went, those are the families that we think, wow, that she had the courage to reach out and ask for help. And she did get help. But those families, and like when we talk about privilege, because of our good fortune to be where we are, I do feel so much for these children and families, and that's what motivates me to keep working and keep reaching out and keep getting this information out, that we hope that they would reach out and that people would be able to get them connected with help that might help them through this incredibly challenging time. I mean, so.
You're muted, Jen.
There we go. Intricacies of multiple screens up at once. Thanks,
Yeah.
Fran.
I got you.
So thank you everyone for this. I'm going to pull up a slide where we have some resources listed. And as you've been hearing from our partners here on this panel, this is clearly not an exhaustive list of all of the available resources that we have here in the community. So one of the great things about these resources that I'll pull up is that most of them are websites that have collated various different resources. So going to these websites will lead you to a variety of different resources that you might be looking for. So County Department of Behavioral Wellness, the school district, they've pulled together a pretty comprehensive list for youth and families. And then as well, the library has our own page on mental health and wellness, which has some basic information as well as links to more specific local things within our community. And then because we're the library, I also have a recommended reading list that everyone can take away from. And within that, there are books for all ages. So there are some picture books. There is a fantastic graphic novel that is in there, which is accessible to a lot of individuals who might not otherwise pick up a book. as well as some fiction and nonfiction that are great for learning, but as well opening up ourselves and our empathy to the vast mental health, mental wellness world that there is. So I'm going to leave this slide up while I also ask all of the panelists for their last thoughts. So if you're online, if you're on Zoom, a suggestion is to take a screenshot of this page so that you can then have that for access later. And with that, whoever wants to go first with final thoughts for mental health during COVID in our community.
I think my final thought I'll share first is that no matter how anyone might be feeling and thinking that this can't possibly be the same way others are feeling, can almost guarantee that your feeling is being shared by others. Nobody is alone in this. Nobody, no matter what, no matter how unique your situation feels, nobody is alone. So to reach out for help when you're feeling that way, and the better we take care of ourselves, the stronger we feel, the better we feel, and the better we're able to take care of others. And that's how we create a resilient community.
And just to carry that thought a little bit further is to reach out, be that neighbor, be that friend, be that person. If you see someone hurting, reach out to your community. If you are witness to a situation that's that you're concerned about, reach out, and in that moving forward gives us a tremendous amount of power, but in being in touch with our own strength that we can make a difference is very meaningful. And I think by finding a way to give and give back carries that energy out into the world, and we can all benefit. So get involved and take good care of yourself.
And I think echo everything that's been said, and just say that the pain you're feeling is temporary. If you're in pain, like others have said, tell someone, and don't believe what your head's telling you. Your head's not always your best friend. So yeah, ask for help.
Great. So thank you everyone for joining us. This video will be available afterwards. So if this is something that you would want to share with others, know that it will be here on our Facebook page. Once we end here, it'll be available as a link. And as well, we'll be editing it and putting up on YouTube and be able to share out. So this is not something that stops here. This is not a conversation that ends with this, but we hope that it moves on and allows ripple effects through the community, because as everyone that has joined us has said, that this is something we need to be continuously talking about, that we need to be destigmatizing, and that it just needs to be part of a regular health and wellness routine and not mental health off in its own corner. So we thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our panelists once again. And we look forward to continuing to serve all of you.